Call this meeting to order. Alpine Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. It's all, well, we do have the flags. Stand and salute the flags. We don't need to.
We can.
I want to. Yep. That's good enough. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Learn that. Yeah, the time is 5:30. City Secretary, do you want to do a roll call?
Yes, all members are present today, excluding Richard Portillo, who is absent. Yeah,
So we do have a quorum.
we do have a quorum. We need 4 to have a quorum.
Okay. All right. Let's see, we have a couple new members, one new member. So would you like to introduce yourself?
My name,
You can sit down.
my name is Scott Fielder, and I moved here about 4 years ago and involved in a lot of things. You'll see me at city council meetings, other things. I got on this because I wanted to be on this, so nobody twisted my arm.
What's your name again?
Guy Fielder.
Not that we even know. Well, just teasing you.
Mm,
You had a seat out there, right?
I used to.
Yeah, had your name on it.
All right. I don't think we need to read the minutes from the last meeting. Has everybody read the minutes and does everybody approve? Does everybody? Unanimous, I think.
We need a motion, a second, and a.
Need a motion?
I make a motion to. approve it.
Alrighty.
Second.
And I don't believe I should vote because I wasn't here. I read it, but I have no point of reference.
You can second it.
Okay.
So it's already seconded. We just need
Okay.
a vote, and you can vote on it. You're a part of the commission now.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, and if you could just take a.
Take a hand vote. Everybody approve the minutes? Okay, all right,
Unanimously approved.
unanimously approved. Public comments. We got one.
Darren Nance, Ward 3. I just wanted to make a quick public comment on item 6A for the short-term rental to parking regulations that were going to be updated. Just wanted to say I saw the clarification here. Guidelines are as follows: 1 parking space per sleeping unit. So it looks like what was removed is the common area out of what was actually in there. So that will drop the amount of parking spaces, which I think is good. I just wanted to state my opinion on this would be, looks like, so if you got a 2-bedroom, now it's going to require 2 parking spaces, 4-bedroom, 4 parking spaces. I think we could ask Drew, but I think on the residential side for just people that own homes here, it's 1 parking space for their home. 1 distinct parking unit or something like that for their home. So the standard's a lot higher for short-term rental. I would prefer if the citizen to see that lowered so it's less onerous on the actual STR owners. And one thing I was going to say back on it is, I think council has had a one permit that they were working with was a unit on Del Rio, and with the 3 bedrooms and the common space, that was going to require 4 parking spots. So now with this one updated, it'll still be 3 parking spots with a 3-bedroom. But I think council had the issue of what is a bedroom? What is a sleeping unit? Because if you look at Zillow, where that unit could be for sale or anything else, it's a 3-bedroom. When you look at their permit, it's for 2 bedrooms. So they probably turned one of those bedrooms into an office. I don't know how city council is going to have to deal with that of what's a legitimate bedroom, what's an office space, or maybe you have 2 offices in your house and 1 bedroom. So I would prefer to just limit that, make it 1 parking spot. So we're not trying to police what a bedroom is and what a bedroom is not. And then final comment I was going to say on that
1
is,
parking spot per bedroom.
I would prefer just 1 parking spot for the actual home, similar to what the residential is required right now too. So if you have a residential home, you have to have 1, I think, distinct parking unit. They would have clarification, actually, Drew and Jessica, on this. And that was kind of my final comment is the higher the standard is for the more parking units you have, the more issues and vocalization you're probably going to get from the STR community. So the lower standard that is, the less problems they're going to have to deal with as far as, and the city will have to deal with as far as from the permitting process. So I was just going to say I think it would behoove the city. I think a lot of times whenever I work with the city, I always try to lean on their city administration and stuff for guidance. So I'd be really interested to see what Drew and Jessica actually think on this
Okay.
issue.
I
And
forgot-
we can
I
discuss
forgot-
that at the discussion item,
Okay.
and the board is not allowed to comment back and forth with.
I forgot to have him introduce himself though.
He did.
He did introduce himself. Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? No more public comments, Drew? I mean, Geo, public hearings, none? We already approved the minutes. We don't have any discussion items. We do have 2 action items. I will read the first action item. Approve a recommendation to the city council to implement an ordinance repealing chapter 90, taxation article 5, short-term rental to the Alpine Code of Ordinances, establishing an article 5, short-term rentals to chapter 22, basically moving it, businesses to Alpine Code of Ordinances, amending the parking requirements for short-term rentals within the city, providing the establishment of up to a $2,000 penalty per occurrence for violations of the ordinance. And
And we'll just need a motion and a second to approve to get the discussion started.
start. I need a motion to approve.
I made a motion to approve.
Need somebody-
Second.
Motion has been seconded. We can begin discussion. We'll start with you. Do you have any?
I think that $2,000 penalty jumped out at me quite a bit there.
Of course, that's not that's the maximum. That's not the minimum.
Is that by some guidance or is that,
And it's because it's a health and safety violation, so the city is able to, basically set the penalty up to $2,000. But, we typically don't do that because if we issue a fine or citation over 500, it would be prosecuted in a different court. So we typically keep the fine amounts to under 500, even though we have the ability to go up to 2,000 for health and safety.
okay, thank you. That's the only question I had so far.
All right, do we need to read the ordinance? I think
No,
most people have read the ordinance already.
Yeah, so
Okay.
since it was included in the packet, we
Right.
don't have to unless somebody requests it, and I can read it out loud if y'all want to. But a copy is included there in front of y'all as well, so you can review it. But if you want me to read it, I can read it. to you.
I think we got it. We got it here.
Okay.
So,
I have several questions. The first one addressed to Drew. We're taking a residence and we're moving it into a section of code that is for businesses. The codes and ordinances for residences are more lax than the codes and ordinances for businesses. Are you intending that these former residents, new businesses are going to meet business codes and standards?
As far as short-term rental, yes, it would meet our life health safety standards that we have set in place and that Jess and I do check on fire extinguishers, smoke detectors. All that. What I couldn't find in here, and I've looked in multiple cities around the state of Texas. We're probably the most stringent on parking that I have found.
I
whether it
have
be
comments
locally,
about parking as well. We'll get there.
you know, but yeah, as far as it relates to a direct business, we still treat it like your home, because if you want to rent yours out, you can always pull that and go back to your own rental. So I want to be able to set this for a R1, R2 district and meet the qualifications for that specific.
Case in
residential.
point, in a residence, the load per square foot for a balcony or a raised deck is 100 pounds per square foot. For a business, it's 200 pounds per square feet, because in a business, people will tend to aggregate closer together. We've seen in the news in the last several years where residences that have become short-term rentals, and they've had a party and everybody's dancing on the
Correct.
deck out back and it collapses. So what the point of my question is, there are several things, a business is like a hotel.
Mhm.
Are you expecting them to comply with the same rules and regulations as a hotel?
Sorry. Well, You know, to me, at the end of the day on that, take in personal responsibility and kind of common sense. We do have occupancy maxes that we have that we allow 2 per bedroom. And whenever we do our inspections, we do have occupancy maximums. You would hope that wouldn't be the case of 20 people going in on a balcony, but it still meets our requirements. In relation to what Mr. Nance was saying, if we start challenging and making everybody, you have a balcony on top of yours, but it's only a 4-bedroom, there should be 8 there, but there's 30 people there. It's kind of a slippery slope, because then we're going to go full engineer
Right.
plans.
So the point of my questioning is to move it from a residence to a business. Is that the best choice that we could make? Because we're gonna put it under businesses, but it's not gonna comply with many of the business ordinances. Is there another class that we could consider or that we could put it into? Because, you know, you're basically putting a square peg in a round hole.
If there's a different classification, I haven't seen it in my experience of being an inspector
Okay.
for any municipality.
It'd still be a residence.
I mean, it would still be a residence. If you rent it out for a year, you have your permit for a year, then you decide not to do it anymore. You know, that's your choice. It's also your choice who you decide to rent to as well.
Okay.
And I know there are a lot of, like we said,
When I buy a property, I'm supposed to get what's called an occupancy permit.
mhm,
And even though it went from homeowner A to me, there still needs to be an occupancy permit, I believe, under our current codes.
yeah, as if you build a new home for a building final occupant, yes, sir.
Okay, but what about the transfer of residence? Existing residents?
If you were to sell your home to him, no, sir, no.
No occupancy permit? Okay.
Just at the time it was being built or any alterations, remodels, any big scope of work
Okay.
that you would do after.
And again, as you know, I'm 70 years old. Our society and our culture has changed dramatically
Mhm.
since I was a child.
Yes.
Common sense is not common practice today,
Agreed.
and personal responsibility is a thing of the past.
Yeah, but we can't legislate common sense.
No,
We
we
cannot.
cannot, but we can't depend on them either.
Say it ain't so.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're going. Yeah, there's nothing we can do that.
yeah, no,
We can't
it's
legislate.
it's a very slippery slope. I've never heard of,
And we're not gonna try to regulate common.
Like land they don't with you anymore, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The only other question that I have right now, without getting into specific lines, is a lot of these homes are old.
Mhm.
And because they're old, and because a lot of them have also passed through generations, where this was my grandparents' home, my parents' home, now it's my home. They may have open flame heaters. They may have electric heaters that if you actually touch them, cause
Mhm.
first-degree burns. They may have 2-prong electrical outlets that are not
Mhm.
grounded. If we move them into the business category, are we still gonna allow that?
yeah, code defines it as the time of the code that it meets at the time it was built. Yeah, if they were to make any renovations, they would have to upgrade everything. So in a sense, if we were to do a short-term rental and it was a 1920 house, if Mrs. Isley and I go in to do our life health safety inspections, I mean, you're talking 20, 30, 50, 100 grand just to get it operable.
Yeah, like when they did the W.W. Townsend House, all that was that old wiring.
Mhm.
Then they had to put the new wiring in, they couldn't even put it in the walls. They had to bring it outside and put it in pipes and all that. Meet
Yeah,
code.
no, it's definitely a gray area. I do understand and appreciate where you're coming from, but my personal opinion, that would be heavily overregulated if we were to go that route. Because we wouldn't be able to enforce that just on any general residential property. If it met code at the time it was built.
Then the only other thing about life safety, health, safety and welfare. Most of these old houses, the windows are all painted shut. There's no way to open them.
Yeah,
And the doorways, which are the only 2 safety egresses to
Mhm.
escape a fire, are not necessarily located near the bedrooms. So if bedroom windows are painted shut, but we still want to protect people.
Mhm.
Would
No,
we
that's something-
consider putting an axe or a bat in every bedroom so they could break out the window?
We could look into that, but we do try to make sure, Jess and I, make sure the windows are operable. They do have to have an approved fire escape plan posted at all times there and with our application. So we go over all that whenever we're on site doing our
Okay.
inspection.
Understand the, again, the point of all of that
Mm-hmm.
is liability.
And they have to have a map too, right?
Yes.
Posted, right?
Yeah, and the floor plan, I
Yep,
saw
yep,
all of
yep.
that. So again, I just want to make sure that everybody signed off, just like I signed all these documents that I understood the handbook and I understood the open policy and all this other stuff. We need to make sure that in the application process, people sign documents that delineate their responsibilities and that they attest in writing that they read them, they understand them, and they agree to them.
Yes, sir.
Otherwise, we're gonna all end up in a lawsuit.
No,
Can I provide some clarification on my earlier statement? I believe we actually can prosecute up to $2,000 in our municipal court as long as it is for health and safety violations. But currently, we only have a $281 fine set up. And I don't see us really having to go higher, but $2,000 is allowable for health and safety issues. I just wanted to clarify, I believe we actually can prosecute those.
That's the max right now.
Right, that is.
that'd probably only be used in our more egregious cases, repeat offenders, not first time.
Joanna?
I have a question. Is this a very often issue? That's what it came brought to us?
No, it was just brought up. We had two instances. One, I think, when approved right now, correct me if I'm wrong, off Del Rio Street. Where it became an issue, like he was mentioning with the office, it was actually locked shut. So they use it as a supply room. When they're not there or clean and get supplies, so it is a 2-bedroom.
We have at least two that have been postponed due to.
Due to the parking. No, it's honestly, it's not an issue that we've seen. Everybody has off-street parking. It's just a matter of how much. Just one, if you were to build a new 4-bedroom, 2,000 square foot home, if you were to do calculations, you could potentially need up to 7 or 8 parking spots. Just due to square footage, which some could be limited out here to get off-street. Whether if you weren't gonna do a short-term rental, you could keep it for yourself. You only need one. But to automatically transfer, I just think it's not benefiting the community to make you put up to 7 more. Cause then we're going through impervious cover, our percentage, 56% impervious. You don't wanna concrete your whole yard. It's just,
These
Oh, wow.
parking spots do not have to be concreted, right? Don't have to be
No.
paved,
no,
but
just,
can they be on grass?
no, and that's what we actually
Yeah,
have on the.
I read that,
second
so I
part.
just want to make that clear.
Yeah, we definitely do not want them to park just in their front yard, on the sidewalks, grass, make sure it's impervious cover, whether it be concrete, gravel, we'll make them put,
And they have to have a map with those parking spaces indicated, correct?
that's on the application,
Right.
yes, sir,
Yeah.
parking plan. So they're definitely full well aware of what our expectations are whenever we go out and perform our inspection before the CO.
Okay, do we need any more comments, especially on the parking?
Well,
You said you had a,
yeah, so if we go to page 5, an occupant means any individual person. Can we drop individual? An occupant means any person? Because again, lawyers tend to focus on words and use words to circumvent. Individual implies one. I'm just proposing we drop individual, any person. Then we say sleeping or possessing, but then we call them an occupant. Would that be better? Sleeping or occupying? Well,
Keep going.
On page 5.
it's on page 5 at the very, very top.
Oh, 5 in the back.
That means,
Never mind, sorry.
so the two proposed changes there would be to remove the word individual and to change possessing to occupying.
That wouldn't negate anything as,
I'm fine with the individual. I mean, that's that way I would probably say it. But,
if we take out individual, I mean, if we're talking about a group specific, would that change the terms of our wording for occupancy load as well? Whenever we imply a limit for the rental?
Again, if I were writing a patent, I would say occupant means any person and then in parentheses, an S after person. So it's a person or persons implied.
okay. So change that to person or persons? That's your recommendation?
Again, individual has a very specific implied meaning. And then possessing means owning, and I think that should be occupying. Then the next question that I have is section 22-63. Near the bottom, we're referring to the short-term rental, and the chapter that we referenced there is the taxation chapter. But one of the points of this ordinance is to move it out of the taxation chapter and into the business chapter. So is that just an error?
So I can speak to moving it. It's because, right, it is set up in taxation. Currently, but we thought that, having it located in business would make much more sense.
I
We actually
understand.
received a comment to that effect, that it was almost predatory for us to have the.
But my
whole-
comment is that we called it the taxation chapter. In this amended document, we're referring to short-term rentals as they appear in the taxation chapter, but we're moving them out of the taxation chapter. So should that not be chapter 22 dash rather than taxation chapter?
So where are you, reading it on the document?
Okay, it's on page 5. It's in section 22-163. And it's the second line from the bottom of that paragraph,
Second line, okay.
the taxation chapter.
Okay, so we can provide clarification if you'd like. It is referring to chapter 90 taxation, and there is a separate portion of the ordinance that doesn't deal with regulating short-term rentals, but it deals with paying hotel occupancy tax. So
What
if you'd
about
like,
sales tax?
well, they don't pay sales tax, short-term rentals. I mean, as far as
A hotel room charges me tax.
that's a hotel occupancy tax.
No, they charge me a sales
And
tax.
the sales tax is allocated however it's allocated, but as far as for short-term rental, what we're concerned about is the hotel occupancy tax. As far as the sales tax, I'm not sure
I don't.
Like- that comes directly to us. It goes to the state and then to us.
It would go to the state and then to us,
She can
but-
correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I sent a whole bunch of stuff in a different context to Megan, where I've stayed in hotels all over the country. And they have they don't call it a tax. They call it fees. But if you add up the fees, it equals the sales tax.
Yeah, again, I believe that they pay sales taxes to the state and the state pays us.
Right.
So we
Okay.
wouldn't really be too concerned there because we don't see that directly from them to us. What we do see directly, it's hotel occupancy tax, which is why there's the reference here. And I'd be happy to, maybe make a change or just to kind of provide clarification, but it's referring to the hotel occupancy tax portion of the taxation chapter, which is separate from the regulation that's talked about in the current ordinance for this.
Okay, so then the next question is, and it gets back to the management entities, because I've had short-term rentals and they were always managed by a management entity. So who is going to be responsible fiscally for paying those taxes? If I sign a document with a management company,
In the end, I believe it'd be the property owner.
and I agree, but I'm not sure that that's clear.
And would you like maybe propose a section that it would make sense to add that in? Or maybe some potential language? What do you think?
Well, and again, if we put it specifically here, would it be better to put it into the chapter you're referring to?
Right, yeah, that would make sense.
Because then it would be more broad in its effect. And then that brings up the next question, which is, if we end up, if they are non-compliant and they're not paying, can we be actionable to the management company? If I operate a plumbing or an electrical company in Alpine, I have to be licensed. Are we gonna ask short-term rental management companies who operate, even if it's by internet, to become licensed?
I'm honestly not too sure about
I
that.
don't think there's a state requirement for that.
Understand, but there's a legal recourse. One way makes it very difficult, one way makes it pretty simple, because it's spelled out.
I could definitely look into that for you.
Well, and again, we don't have to invent all of this, and I'm sorry if I'm being verbose.
Okay, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Martha went through this 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. Marfa discovered that they had a huge short-term rental market in Marfa, and nobody was collecting taxes, nobody was paying taxes. Nobody was permitted. Has anybody talked to Marfa? Has anybody
They've
tried to
talked
learn?
to us. They've approached us for a copy of our ordinance to see what they can implement, and I provided that copy.
Okay, but
So I
what
think
about what
we're-
they've done? They've been down this path.
Well, I think really we were the ones down the path and they were looking for guidance from us, is what I'm telling you.
Okay,
So I don't really know that it'd be a great benefit for us to get with Martha, since they approached us for more.
Okay. all right.
I think the owner would be responsible for the property tax.
I agree.
So if you're saying you.
I agree, but I think that goes in that document that I suggested that we include in the permitting process, that I have read the ordinances. I have understood the ordinances, and I understand I'm responsible for compliance with these ordinances and make them sign it. At which point we have recourse on them.
Don't they have a permit? They gotta get a permit.
They do, but
And I mean, part of it does reference, their responsibilities to pay the tax, and if you'd like, I think, I mean, you could definitely review the permit, and we might be able to include it at the next meeting, or you could give me a call and I could, we could review it.
and
Regardless, the permit documentation does have a lot of information. In fact, we get a lot of complaints that it's too long. So,
So I have a when you have a short-term rental, let's say you're going through one of these, rental things on VRBO or Airbnb or somebody like that. They collect all the taxes and pay it.
in theory,
Who's
Yeah,
they?
they
The owner?
claim they do in their documents, and
Okay.
so far, nobody's complained that they haven't been paying it, so.
are you talking about the
The
Hot
owner?
tax.
platforms collecting on behalf?
Yes,
So they collect for the state, but not for the city, and the city could basically choose for them to collect for us, but we would then give up our right to know who's operating, to have any information. We couldn't get like names, nothing. We would just receive a check. So that's why we haven't decided to do that, because if there's, we basically give up any regulation.
so if they are paying it to the state, is there a mechanism to get back to the city?
No, because there's a 6% that they pay to the state, and the
Right.
platforms collect that and send a big check to the state.
Right,
But as far as us, again, we'd give up kind of a lot of the regulating. It would, if they collected for us, basically we wouldn't be able to know exactly, it would just send us a check.
They would be regulatory then too.
but at this point in time, the city is not getting any, or guaranteed, I should say, any hot from any of these platforms.
We don't receive it directly from the platform. We
Oh.
receive it directly from the operator, which is why we do have the permitting process, because we have the regulations set by ordinance, and then the operator is responsible to pay to the city directly. So the city could do audits and see who's not paying, we have all of them permitted. Kind of for that reason as well, so we know. And
That's,
they pay us directly, so.
that's very unclear, a bit confusing, because I had a short-term rental for a few years, and they claim that they pay the hot tax, which is, you're saying, okay, they do, but they don't pay it directly to you or to the city.
They do pay it directly to the city.
I thought you said they paid it to the state.
No, the state's portion is collected by the platform, and they remit that to the state, but the city's is paid directly by the operator or the owner. They come here and pay it. So
okay,
we do have records of all the hotel occupancy tax payments per operator.
Okay, and we've used the term operator several times now in this discussion, just trying to clarify what
Owner
ourselves. We have no definition for what an operator is. If you look here, we have a hosting platform. We have a agent or an intermediary.
Okay, we can add a definition.
I think
for
we need to
operator.
have a definition for an operator, and then we need to specify if the operator is the person, the party responsible, that it so states that they are the party responsible.
Okay,
So again.
So it should go with owner somewhere in that same area.
Or again, those definitions, I don't want to try to put that horse before the cart, but Tom, cities all over the state,
Mhm.
Austin being one that they have a huge problem collecting hot. And again, if we're not precise and concise on the responsibility and consequences of not paying, consequences is something that I think we need made to embellish a little bit as well. You know, if an owner, a property owner has an agent acting on their behalf and the agent doesn't pay the property, pay all these taxes and so forth, then does the city have recourse on the owner? You know, right now, if they don't pay their property taxes to the county, we can at some point foreclose on that property. Do we have that legal right under the short-term rentals for not payment?
I believe if there's a short-term rental operating, we require proof that the owner allowed the lessee, let's say, for example, if they're not the owner, they need to provide proof that they're allowed to do so. So in the end, I think we can automatically go after the owner. I'm not sure. We could definitely look into that for you, just to
Yeah.
kind of follow up. But, I'm pretty
And-
sure we
and-
can go automatically go.
And I
after
know it sounds like I'm cutting, you know, splitting hairs and picking nits, but at some point, we're gonna have to enforce this. And when the time comes that we have to enforce it, we have to have a leg to stand on. And I'm not sure that we have enough teeth in what we have today to empower Drew to go be the bad cop and make them come into compliance. And there does have to be consequences. The fine is certainly one of them.
Do you know of any success stories in this area? Like any other cities or
In
communities that
the
have,
enforcement,
well, the collecting and the enforcement?
again, I haven't reviewed codes and ordinances for other communities.
I just didn't, okay, I was
I
curious. if
just
you
know
knew
that
of
it's a
any.
huge problem statewide.
Hmm.
And, you know, Gio, and again, I'm not picking on you, but isn't it coincidental that the amount collected for the state happens to also be the amount the state gets for sales tax?
the 6%. It's set by state
6%.
law, 6%
Yeah.
in the city.
Not-
can get.
Geo can't change it.
Yeah, and so again, I'm topic for a different discussion.
Okay,
Well,
I mean, I agree. There's already processes in place, and I don't think that we'd have to do anything additional to go after the owner for the hotel occupancy tax but we can definitely look into that and clarify for you.
Okay,
just to
but
make
again, my
sure.
question was, can we put a lien on the property?
Yes,
So, okay, we
Sure.
can. All right.
Okay, anything else?
No, I don't have any.
No.
Well, I've got a lot of notes, so let's move on to section 22-168. All work done to the property must meet all city permitting requirements as spelled out in the code. Here again, we're in the process of changing the code. I went to Jessica to get some permits and stuff. It happened to be when we were moving from a code that was 3 years old to a new code. And I would ask that you add clarification here, made to the effect, I'm not trying to pick the words, but to the effect that it's spelled out in the code that is either in effect at the time of the application or is code that is being considered. And again, I could meet code today and that code could be changed in 2 weeks or a month later. So
Make it.
just,
Yeah,
Current-
what we can do, we can,
High tell us that state our short-term rentals, we follow all state and laws and guidelines, and we can put a lien on the property.
okay.
Sorry.
So
and let me
nothing,
tell-
nothing additional has to be done in order for us to do that, right? Because they were asking if the operator is responsible and, or the owner. But I said regardless, we could go after the owner for delinquent taxes, right?
Yes, usually, so the state calls them registered agents. There you go. And so,
what is a registered agent?
I don't know how the state has it defined.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
I don't know how the state has it defined, but there's penalties. So if they don't pay within the time, we can actually apply penalties for the state. And it's a certain percentage of their delinquent. And then if they don't pay forever, we can actually put a lien on the properties.
And that's regardless if it's an owner or operator,
Correct.
right?
It would be the property in general. The city's never put a lien on any, and it's not just short-term rentals, by the way, that's also hotels. And the city has never put a lien on the hotel, and we do have delinquent hotel peers,
Mhm.
How delinquent?
years.
Do we need to fix that? Laws are not laws
That's
if
not
they're
what we're
not
talking-
enforced.
That's not what we're talking about
Yeah, but
now.
laws are not laws if they're not enforced.
But we're back to
Thank you.
current code.
Okay, so
Applicable code, what would you recommend?
I can add verbiage before the next meeting to reflect, because we do go back to our 2021 ICC family.
Current code,
yeah,
So-
the
But
code,
isn't-
the
isn't
code in
that-
effect.
Isn't that the ordinance right below it in the parents?
2021 ordinance, or is that?
I guess, I mean, that's the way I'd read that sentence.
yeah,
Okay,
Okay,
maybe in the code, I don't know, but that sentence tells me that they're referring to ordinance number such and such there.
okay. Then my next is on section 22-170. And it's in the first sentence. It shall be unlawful for any owner of premises used for short-term rental to fail to pay hotel tax. That owner may be in an agreement with a management entity that the management entity is responsible for collecting and paying. So do we need to say owner of premises or a management entity if one is in use or something to that effect?
I think you're
I
making
would
it
say
way.
no, because
I think
first of
that-
all, I did mention that we require permission in the application from the property owner as well. I mean, and this just says that in the end, the owner is going to be responsible.
Okay.
regardless.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about parking. I agree with Darren. I believe the parking that you're proposing is too onerous. This is intended to regulate people. It's not intended to punish them. And so I have rented short-term rentals in Annapolis, Maryland. Some of those homes were built in the 1700s. I've also rented recently in New Braunfels, Texas. Some of those homes were built in the late 1700s, early 1800s. They didn't have parking. The carriage and the horses were down the street in the stables. This is what they have done. Okay? In Annapolis, they require one parking space. They also have provided public parking. Now, again, Annapolis is home to the Naval Academy. So they can have 100,000 visitors in one day during a football game. New Braunfels is the state location for Oktoberfest. Same thing. They can have 100,000 visitors in one day. So they have provided public parking and public parking areas. What they've done with short-term rentals is they provide one parking space
For the owner?
for the renter. There is one parking space.
What
on-
about the people that are renting the space?
Well, let me finish.
Okay,
So they have public parking spaces. So what, if there's 3 families and 3 cars, one parking space, the ordinance says that one person follows the other 2 people to the public parking areas where they may park. And then they bring them back to the house. And we have public, there's parking right over here. There's parking right over there. There are city-owned properties that are probably city-owned because they tend to flood. They could be made into public parking spaces. I think that's a very workable solution and one that we should consider.
I do want to say that we've received a lot of feedback from residents that aren't okay with, the parking and whatnot, so. I mean, a lot of the feedback that I've gotten has been like to be stringent, So I'm not sure.
I'm sorry.
Stringent
Stringent.
on parking, and to making sure that these places do have adequate parking. So.
But you can park on the street overnight anywhere in the city.
Yeah, but
Right.
we may need to fix that as well. That's a different discussion, but.
Well, no,
parking
not
is
really. It
problem.
is similar because if you're saying, oh, you can only have one parking spot per this property, and then you got 5 people parked on the street, those 5 people parked on the street are not breaking the law.
Okay, I wasn't clear.
Do you
What
propose amendments to the section?
I do, but I also am not saying that we shouldn't allow them to park on the street. I'm saying that they need to provide for one parking space. If that means giving up landscaping, then that should be a requirement. And that they have to cut the curb and they have to put an apron, but they need to provide one off-street parking space.
Not per sleeping unit.
Not per sleeping unit, per rental unit. And the parking ordinance needs to be clear that everybody else can't park on the street.
Okay, so the way that it's worded right now, on this proposal, you see the underlined section, the motor vehicles of all occupants shall be parked only on the permitted and approved driveway of the short-term rental property. No motor vehicles shall be parked on the vegetated area of the short-term rental property or in the public right of way. While occupying a short-term rental property, no person shall park in violation of this ordinance or in violation of the parking plan. The owner must submit in accordance with section 22-165A4. So to me, from what you've just said, it's, you would just want to see it one parking space per rental unit instead of sleeping unit, because the
Right,
rest of your
right.
feedback is already covered.
But and I also would like to see it added that they're not supposed to park on the street, that there is adequate public parking and one party ferries people back and forth to the adequate parking.
Well,
I think that's
it
way
already-
too complicated.
It already
Way too
said
complicated.
that they can't park in a public right of way.
Yeah, but if there's only one space and there's 3 cars, what's the recourse for the other 2?
Park somewhere else.
So how does
That's
everybody
what I
else
just
feel
said,
about
park
the-
somewhere else and somebody ferries them back. But they
No,
have
I'll
to
I'll
park
leave that
somewhere.
part about them ferrying them back.
No, they can walk
If
back.
this was passed at that point, it would be a police issue on that one, but it's however y'all wanna.
If I might be able to chime in on this. I live in the only house right in the middle of a commercial area. 109 North Third, right across from the visitor center. I rarely get a parking in front of my house because it's always filled with everybody on the street. Now I have on the side of the house and a very busy, hard to get in and out of area on Avenue E, a little section there. If you want to get rear-ended trying to back out, you can. I have a garage in back. I have a 4,500 square foot property, by the way. It's 4 bedrooms and it is zone commercial. There you go. So I'm listening to everything everyone's saying here. My garage in back, I can barely get in and out of because it's usually covered up with cars from those that want to park for the Granada or the Saddle Club. I mean, there's been times I couldn't even get out of my garage. Couldn't go across the alley. And I will also tell you while I'm at it, that alley, I have cameras that I've put up back there because I've had my garage backed into, had to add it for a brand new garage door, $2,500. I've had the back end of the whole thing tagged, had to repaint it. So I put up cameras, working cameras. Number one, and this is sort of off topic, you really need to put some speed bumps down that alley because every 20 minutes my camera goes off with people walking up and down or driving up and down. Somebody's going to get hit at some point in time. The second is that if I want to park, if I have company at my house, very rarely do I have a place for them to park even in front of my house because it's usually taken up with cars from whatever event is going on. I've even asked, can I just get a couple of orange cones put out here so I can have some parking? You know, we pay a lot to be here. So I understand everything you guys are saying. I've often thought if I could put meters up in front of my house, I could probably pay my bills. And maybe the city needs to consider putting meters up somewhere. That would slow things down a little bit. Or you could even just say, along with what you're doing, maybe if you're going to have another vehicle to come in and park, you need to come get a permit from the city that you hang, which they have to pay for, that they hang on their mirror for one extra vehicle. Just a thought, Because if I'm parked at Sol Ross and I don't have a little one of those little things, they're gonna tow my car. Or they're gonna tell me, that they may not do it, but they're gonna call me and let me know. Cause I've had that happen to me before. But as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to the parking in the city, I completely understand everything that everybody's saying here, because I've been through it for the last 3 years at my house. I could see the city trying to use this to maybe get some revenue, if you're just gonna do that. The tags, it wouldn't be hard just to buy a tag, make the tenants, if they're gonna have more than one vehicle, come in and buy the tag and hang it up, and you just put the dates that it's good for on it. Otherwise, if I don't see a tag on a car parked in front of my house, I'm gonna call and say, if it's been there for 2 days, which happens, I've had them pull RVs up there and roll out, literally, on the street there. Then I can call, and maybe the city, not the city, but PD, Alpine PD, could check with the city or their little charts or whatever, and see if this person's supposed to be there. And if not, they can be moved. But there's alternatives, and there's other things that can be done here. I deal with it every day, so I understand completely what you guys are saying. And I still say only one vehicle with maybe the option of another one to add to get through all of that.
Right.
I'll rest my case now.
She talked about another topic that I wanted to bring up about a parking ordinance. And again, Annapolis and New Braunfels, if you live there, you have a sticker that you put on your windshield. And they have the signs that say parking by permit only, for the reasons Joanne just described, because they have narrow streets. You park one car on the street and barely can one car get by. If you parked a car on both sides of the street, a car can't get between them.
Okay, I think we need to get back to the issue here on parking for this specific purpose. I know parking is a big problem in Alpine, and I think we do need to talk about maybe permits and things like that. But we're looking at short-term rentals right now. So I did have a question. On the permit for the short-term rental, it will tell you how many bedrooms are in there, right? So let's say there's a living room that you can sleep in with a fold-out couch. Would that be considered a bedroom, depending on how they advertise it? Could they advertise it as a bedroom?
We would count that as occupancy, yeah.
Okay. And right now, they're supposed to provide, the owner has a parking spot, room to park.
If it is owner occupied, correct.
But then every bedroom has a parking space right now,
Under the current.
under the current
ordinance,
rules.
yes. Plus 500 square foot of
Right.
common area.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's probably too much space to be devoted. I mean.
Are you talking about the one parking space per sleeping in? Is
Correct,
too much of a requirement?
right.
So do you think one parking space per rental unit is better?
I think that would, I mean, that's the minimum, and there
Okay.
should be one.
And does the
and-
commission, the members widely agree with that? Is that
do.
where we're going? Okay, anyone else?
I think you can use the others to your benefit down the line.
Yeah, as
And
long
I
as
think
we
it
have
needs to
minimum.
say
law.
something
You can
about,
have an option,
yeah.
but let the city have that benefit if you're gonna do
And
that.
a lot of the ones we see normally do have 2 or 3 parking spots as well, but just on a select few.
I mean, typically my property, if it was being used as an Airbnb, which I think at some point it has in the past, and I don't plan on it, I'm just gonna say. That it has 4 bedrooms, 4 full baths, and a second living area upstairs. I could very easily turn it in, and I'd need probably at least 3 to 4 parking spaces. I could do that, because each room has its own bedroom. I really don't wanna do it though. And I see what everybody's talking about, and I would rather, even if I'm gonna do that, they gotta go buy a permit.
Well, the advertisements typically that I've read and stayed, it usually says sleep 6, 2 bedroom. Or 2 bedrooms, sleep 6, or
I would
whatever,
sleep
and that would
easy
imply
10.
there's some kind of rollout bed or a fold out bed. So I don't know, if we're doing per bedroom.
You don't wanna do it per bedroom, you
Yeah.
wanna do it per premise.
That's what I think
Yeah.
it should be per premise.
Yeah,
right,
okay.
Yeah,
All right,
And
that's
that's
what
what I'm about.
yep.
I'm just making sure that we're not I'm not
Is that
confused.
directly opposite what the citizens want?
Okay.
They want to be more stringent?
Well, on a lot of the feedback, of course, we only hear.
I think that's
feedback.
right. One minimum per property.
Anyways, a lot of it is that they think it should be more stringent.
More stringent.
I mean, it's y'all's recommendation. I don't disagree with that.
The visitors that come to the area probably are willing to comply with certain things along that line. I mean, you could have them pull up in a 35-foot RV. That's one, I've seen it happen
Well,
every day.
Yep.
And to
Pulling a trailer with a car behind it.
Andrew's point, they can just say, where does it draw the line and how are we going to know that they don't change it down the line from an office or storage space to a sleeping unit?
Okay.
It becomes really hard to enforce.
Right.
Just like the parking that was being discussed earlier, New Braunfels has like 125,000 population and 500 to 1,000 employees. That would be super taxing at this point, but for the future, and hopefully we can go that route. I mean, like I said, I don't disagree, per rental unit sounds.
Mhm.
good. What do y'all think?
But again, Annapolis and New Braunfels do have restricted parking. And on the rental, on the website where it's telling you about the property, it says on-street parking is unlawful after 10 PM or after 11 PM. And then it provides a map where there is public parking.
That's pretty common in a lot of cities.
That-
So it's not
and
just
I
that. It's
understand.
Not just that,
What if,
but
just a thought that just popped into my head, maybe not a good one, but by premise, if someone were to come in to get the permits, per Airbnb or per premise, per property. But let's say you were a situation, and I'm not even for this, but I'm just throwing it out there, like mine, where you have a larger property which could use more parking. That would have to go under a special permit where they would have to come in and say, I have a bigger property, this is this, and you look at it and you say, okay, well, yeah, we could do that because you do have a 4,500 square foot property. You don't have, it's not like a 2,000 square or 1,000 square foot property. And you could get a special permit for that, which would allow them the hang tags to give it, the property owner would have to come in and get paid for that property. Just saying.
That's similar to what we have set up now. 'Cause I use currently, because it says plus one parking space per 500 square feet of common area, so.
Maybe you
how
need to
would
raise that up for 1,000 or whatever.
I
Increase
don't,
that.
I don't believe unless we allow them to park on the street, I believe a lot of the properties around here, especially the older properties, there's no way they're gonna be able to provide parking for every.
Not in the higher
and
density
500
areas. Yeah, yeah.
square feet. It's not possible.
but what places don't permit parking in the street?
I'm saying if we don't, didn't say, and I don't think we should.
You don't want the street congested, it has to be.
Well, do you think there's a consensus on the direction y'all like to go?
I think it's one space per premise with special permit down the line, and if the premise is like a 1,500 and you have said, okay, this gets one parking space, then if somebody wants to rent that property, then it's on the renter to come in and pay for the extra permit to do so. Let the city make the money.
Do you think
Yeah, looking
that's
back at the
feasible?
22,172. I think that's what we need to change it from one parking space per sleeping unit
To
the one-
premise.
to premise.
As a minimum.
I was gonna add the correct term, short-term rental.
Yeah,
Right.
Guidelines as follows: one parking space per short-term rental.
Okay.
Premise, short-term rental. But that could go in,
No, because if somebody lives on premise for the short term rental, they have to have.
They have to have,
a
they have to have
residential
those.
and one for the short term. rental.
oh, okay. All right,
Yep.
I see what you're saying.
So regarding Commissioner Laxton's recommendation, would that be feasible for you all to do? Like parking structure for them to pay for an extra permit? Is that something you think you'd be able to do right now with the manpower you have?
Right now, no, I'll be honest with you. That's something we could definitely look into. I could definitely get with New Braunfels, see how they're higher density, how they're
Yeah, they have
set
to
up.
hire more people.
More for your situation there. We see a lot, usually on these other streets away from the downtown district. It's
I
not.
just see it as
problem.
revenue for the city that we should be able to take advantage of, some way. And if it just is someone where they have to come over to where you guys are at, go to the little window, buy the permit, have them made up, make them come in and pay for that to have the extra vehicle there, then you
We'll
have.
go
on
through
record.
our permit for what we have now. Maybe we need to make a few wording changes about off-street parking, but we'll go through. I think it'll be very taxing right now won't say it won't be impossible, but that's something we'll definitely look into.
It has to be enforceable too, and right now we don't have the
That's
people to do
the,
it.
that's the key. is the
Also,
enforcement.
we drive around quite a bit with inspections and doing code enforcement, and there's very few places that I can think of that we have issues getting through a street because of parking issues. Del Rio is one of them, and I understand why they complain about that, and we were talking about that earlier, is because the alley to get to their garages has major issues. And so they have garages off-site, it's just they're not usable because the alley, when it rains, it turns really muddy and it pulls up all the dirt and they just can't get into it, so it's a
Can't get
poor
into it half
design.
the time with all the cars parked on it, and so I get what you're saying.
So for in my mind, thinking about parking issues, I just don't see it being an issue in Alpine because there's very few. I come from Seattle where you can pull your mirrors in to get down roads because it's so tight with people parked on both sides and they're narrow roads. But we have West Texas sized roads out here and there's a lot of right of way for everybody. So for me, in my mind, there's very few roads that we have real issues with parking. And so for me, I just think that it's a little crazy to think about having issues with that.
So I think we need to address that separately as far as city parking.
We'll look into that separately. But set all of the Bronzeville compare
We're
with
just talking
cities as
short
well.
term.
Right,
Still.
we're still just talking about short term. Yeah, I guess I will have a 1-bedroom house that I can park probably 9 vehicles there. I'm lucky.
I made an extra large driveway when I moved here.
All right,
So can we move to penalties? Everybody can we move to penalties?
we can discuss it, yes? Go ahead.
Okay,
What page you at?
that's page
Page
8,
8.
section
Bottom of 8.
22-175 penalties. And again, we want the penalties to be onerous enough to be discouraging bad behavior, but we don't want them to be punitive. The weed ordinance, when you cite me, and you do it every year, sometimes twice, you give me a few days, usually 30 days, to remediate the violation. There's no reference in here of giving them any opportunity to solve the problem before the fines begin. Then the second thing I would say is
So you're talking about grace period?
and well, it's called, I think it would be referred to as is called a remediation period or a solution period.
Okay.
I'll know the correct
If
term.
you cite me, are you gonna start fining me immediately the day of the citation? Or are you gonna give me 5 business days to resolve my violation?
Solution period.
And then you've got this long run-on sentence here about the fines and everything else, and I would say I brought this just as an example. This is what the state of Texas says. Very, very concise and it's not ambiguous. Operating without a valid permit is a misdemeanor, punishable by a fine of not more than $500 per day. Per day. Doesn't go into any further definitions. Okay, so you cite me, I got 5 days to fix it. On the 6th day, it's $500. On the 7th day, it's $500. On the 8th day, it's $500. This is not ambiguous. These long run-on sentences, lawyers are going to pick it apart. And, I don't have anything against lawyers except I don't like them.
I'm glad I'm not.
So that my recommendation would that offer them at least a grace period to resolve it before the fines begin.
Look, we'll
And
change
then-
the terminology if that's what y'all gonna agree with. For us to look into.
I think there should be once they get a citation, they should have at least some time to remediate that. Correct it, especially if you're not mowing your grass or something like that.
Yeah,
Currently
and-
provide that,
Yeah, we follow the same procedure right now as what we do unless it's a life health safety issue.
because currently, don't you write a letter first, provide the opportunity, then you go to citation. when they're-
Yeah,
So I'm not sure that there really needs to be much more. than
Our
that.
citations will start on the third trip out there.
We typically write them a normal letter, and if they don't reply within 15 days, we'll write a certified letter, and that starts the process. After that 15 days of the certified letter, they get a citation. So we give them plenty of time. We give
Give
them
them 30 days basically to get.
You got a
good.
month,
So
basically a month.
Okay.
So
put that in there.
that's a process you follow.
it's
Is
a-
that process documented in our code somewhere?
It's not process. It's the code enforcement process is not in our ordinance. It's based off of what.
Okay, but is it codified somewhere in city documents?
We have a process and procedures.
Yeah, no, it's not codified.
Okay, I would suggest that if that's what we intend to do, that we codify it. Because again, people are gonna challenge us on this stuff when we start trying to enforce it. We've had a long lax period where we don't enforce a lot of things. If we all of a sudden change our modus operandi and we start enforcing things, people are gonna push back.
But do you think that that is a bigger issue and maybe this particular ordinance doesn't need it, or? do you
I'm
feel
saying,
that-
yeah, if it's codified somewhere else, all you need to do is refer to
Just
it.
reverse it. I'll look into that for you.
Okay,
I think there should be, like, I like the month thing.
yeah.
That's long enough. And your grass won't grow that tall.
Look, the ordinance is 14 inches, and when it's at 14 and 1/8, my neighbors start complaining, so I get cited because my neighbors don't want a brewery there.
Put on your grass. I need to know if I can grow like that.
It's weeds.
I need some extra income, I'm all.
Then, believe it or not, that's all I have to say about that one.
All right, we're gonna take a short break, 10-minute break. And we'll be back to discuss the second one.
And my comments on the second one are fewer, by far fewer.
You're the lawyer though. Appreciate that your background though, in the law and all that. Gonna resume the meeting. We're gonna talk about action item number.
Really quickly, I just wanna point out, we haven't actually made a recommendation, and I was wondering if the commission agreed with all of the amendments, and if so, y'all can vote to make that recommendation. So I'll read what I have for the amendments. For section 22-168, building permits required, I have, basically to elaborate, and Andrew did say that he could add verbiage as far as the ICC requirements being added there as well. And then I do have clarifying that, or essentially amending one parking space per short-term rental as far as the parking. And then adding the definition of an operator and declare who is responsible for the tax owner or operator. Did y'all have any other amendments, or is that something that y'all want to proceed on though?
I don't know how we would enforce it, but I believe that if we do go to one parking space per short-term rental, that it needs to be off-street. It needs to state that it needs to be off-street.
It currently does.
That's it? Okay.
It says that it cannot be in a public right of way. And it does also state that it cannot be parked on the vegetated area of short-term rental.
Okay.
And that it will only be permitted and approved driveway of the short-term rental property. That's how it currently reads, right?
Okay, but we're not gonna say anything about on-street parking beyond the one space.
Well, I mean, but beyond, it just says that they're not allowed in the public right of way, which would be.
On the street, yeah.
So were y'all all in agreement with
Let's
those?
put that in the motion.
That's on page 8.
I believe
Mr.
so.
Silver.
Okay, then if somebody wants to make a motion to approve with the amendments.
I make a motion to approve the amendments.
I second.
All vote.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Unanimous? Okay, great, thank you.
No, actually, I did not
You did
vote
not
for
vote?
that.
Okay,
In-
you did not vote. One of them says you
Some,
abstained.
some of the, no, I'm not gonna abstain either. I'm gonna vote against
Okay.
what he said,
Okay.
but partly because part of what you just described is yet to be defined. Drew is going to, in the future, add this verbiage.
Well, if you want, we can prolong it and just set it for the next meeting. If that's what the commission wants to
If
do.
the
then we can
commission,
do
if
that.
the majority of the commission accepts it, then
It's
I'm
just-
just one person.
We're just advisory. We are not regulatory. This goes to the city council.
Right, I understand.
So,
All right, so, so just to be clear, you voted against that. motion,
I
right?
voted against it because I'd like to see what the final revisions include.
Makes sense.
Alrighty, so that went through, approved, and
okay, I will read the second action item. Approve a recommendation to the city council to implement an ordinance amending appendix C zoning article 1. Basic ordinance of the Alpine Code of Ordinances. Amending the city zoning ordinance to provide regulations in the M1 industrial district zone. Providing the establishment of up to a $500 penalty per occurrence for violations of the ordinance. Do I have a motion?
I so moved that we start talking about it.
But,
I
yeah.
say that, have some conversation.
Do I have a second? Okay, we have a second. We can start talking about it.
It's my first comment. If we need to start with Tom. Okay.
No, I'll pass. I'm still,
All right,
thank
go
you
ahead.
though.
My first comment is in the ordinance itself, in the very beginning, the bold part. It says establishment of up to a 500 penalty per occurrence. Now, is that truly going to be per occurrence, or is that going to be per occurrence per day? Because, you know, if you want me to do something that costs $5,000 and I'm only going to pay 500 for that one infraction and we're done, I'm going to pay the 500.
Well, depending on, I
See,
mean,
it's,
when code enforcement follows Texas state law, Code enforcement follows Texas state law, so there are some things where you can be fined every day, depending on the penalty. Just depends on what you're doing. So I'm not.
And this is per occurrence, right? You can go back every day and
So
put
we
it
can-
again.
Occurrence could be different things that you're getting a violation for. It could be high weeds, it could be accumulation of unopened debris, it could be a building violation, it could be. So for each one, you'd get 500.
And so automatically in our code, in the general provisions, it does state that we are allowed to, impose additional citations per day. So it reads specifically, each day, any violation of this code or of any ordinance shall constitute a separate offense.
Where
So
is that? Where is
That is
that?
gonna be in chapter 1 in the general provisions of our code of ordinances, section 1-11. And it talks about in general, anything that is in violation of the code, that we're able to do that. So really, we do have the ability to do that based on the ordinance.
Okay, and then,
My next comment is that I make a motion or move that we remove laboratories from permitted uses.
Can we just have the discussion and what y'all want to do, and then at the end, we can formally do a motion, because we have a lot in it.
Okay.
So laboratory, what page is that on?
That's page 5 under the list of
Oh,
allowed
Laboratory.
laboratories.
oh, I was looking for laboratory.
No, laboratories. The board.
I thought that's what it said. too.
No, I'm sorry. It's my Southern Texas accent. What I'm thinking of, guys, is unless
Well, that's
unless we go further and exclude laboratories that deal with bacteria, viruses, pathogens. Right now, those kinds of laboratories are not disallowed.
So are you of the opinion to strike this out?
I'd strike it.
Strike laboratory.
I would strike it. If you don't strike it, then I would add the verbiage to restrict what is an acceptable laboratory.
Yeah, and that's where we get into a slippery slope, what we were talking about in that, and how we send our wastewater samples, our water distribution samples to Odessa, El Paso, whoever it may be. We were along the lines of that labs, but considering what you were saying, certain bacteria, pathogens, et cetera.
CDC biohazard level 4.
Yeah, so we would.
Well, and
Strike that.
I will point out that Wuhan was a class 1 biological hazard facility, and they still allowed it to escape.
That was China, though.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Union Carbide killed thousands of people in India, and we don't want to repeat that here just because it happened in India.
I don't think, though, that you should strike being able to do wastewater treatment samples.
Well, and that's,
things like
if you
that.
wanna look down at the bottom, look at section E, limitations of uses.
Uh-huh.
Right,
I
yeah.
mean, and
High
maybe we
risk.
could be a little more in depth on high risk or high or hazardous industrial. But you know, if you wanna read through that and tell me what you
I
think.
did and I was gonna suggest down there. So let's talk about. And everything, as long as it's compliant and all the systems are running 5x5, it's safe.
Mhm.
What happens when there's human error, which is the most common failure in every safety system? What happens when there's equipment failure? Okay,
Happens everywhere, that's just a
they
human element.
tried to tell us
of
that the
everything.
lithium farm was perfectly safe as long as everything was in normal conditions. But if that battery had split and emitted gases, people downwind would have died. If that battery plant had caught fire, we could stand there and watch it burn out because we have no way of putting it out, and neither does anybody else. If once started, you can't put it out.
And we definitely don't have the water supply here. potentially to put
And
it
that, again, that's my point. We need to put, I would say we put something in there that says it's safe even allowing for human error or safety system failures.
And that'll probably negate the high risk or hazardous, it won't be labeled as that. Cause they wouldn't put the human error element of that for high risk or hazardous if it is done following proper procedures. It's just kind of a tip.
But we
tat.
can't, again, we can't make it dependent on that nothing bad happens.
Right.
We can't, because bad happens.
It's true. Was everybody in agreement with that strikeout?
Backup laboratory?
Yes, that one.
I got mixed feelings about it, honestly.
Well, we got laboratories that solve.
I
Right.
think you need to
But I
restrict,
think
I would
that-
not strike out laboratories.
Yeah.
So just add more verbiage to restrict
Uh-huh.
something a little more teeth than high risk or hazardous.
But luckily, I don't think Saros, school.
Right, yeah, probably doesn't apply, but we do have
Yeah, but it's
laboratories in
still here,
town.
so.
Um,
I'm just saying, I don't think that they have to follow our code in that way, right?
Because they're state.
Correct.
Universities, yeah. universities.
They're not in our jurisdiction, but that is something we could look more into, Mr. Pilder.
And again, I'm happy to come
Because
meet
the-
with you guys and sit down and
I agree. with
I'll do the
Madam
homework.
Mayor,
I'll
just
try to
striking
figure it
out Laboratory, I think it'd be a little excessive.
The laboratories is just a general word. I mean, what kind of laboratories? But
It could be anything.
could be all, there's all sorts of things, so,
Right.
um,
If anything, we might have to
Kind of wide open.
restructure what subsection E would be for on that one, or make a reference to that,
when,
and then we would go and
Look at
more
what-
into that.
have you looked at what other towns do as far as laboratories go?
No,
I mean-
but I'm sure I can. I've been in my fair share of some in previous inspector experience, and, you know, some of them you'd be surprised are right next door to you. There is a human element of error in there for what could be, but they don't build these buildings on what could be.
Right,
They
right,
build
right,
it
yeah.
on Proper
I
procedures.
mean, I go to Los
Correct.
Alamos all the time, and I'm sure they got.
There are contingency plans, but it's still,
Um,
from what I've seen, doesn't stop the building
Yeah.
process.
no, I've done jobs. I've worked under a vent hood. And I pushed the mushroom button to evacuate the building. Not because of human error, but shit happens.
Yeah, look at what check out and see what Lake Jackson does. You know, that's what Dow Chemical is,
Mhm.
so that's in
Swing.
Texas, so yeah, and that's where I'm from, so.
So I just want to kind of point out that these both were for discussion already.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
so this is proposed as a recommendation to make a recommendation to city council. The commission can certainly choose not to make a recommendation, but that's typically the path that will go. So going back and editing, you know, we had that discussion already. So, if y'all want to make a recommendation, that's fine. If y'all don't, that's fine. But, I think that's the, you know, yes or no question that we need to get to at the end, whether or not the recommendation is going to be made and what kind of amendments would be approved.
Isn't there a level or a coding for different levels of hazardous laboratory or manufacturing process?
There are, oh,
I mean,
and I'll
Yeah,
check in.
there
on
are
internet
codes,
for you.
there certainly are.
seems like this has got to be defined somewhere else.
Yeah, it's by our adopted code. It's on the very last sentence of E.
Yeah.
Couldn't you change it to non-hazardous laboratories and strike experimental and the like?
And that would go back to what your definition of non-hazardous, your
Mm,
definition could
yeah.
be different than a potential builder as well.
Hmm.
So we would definitely have to be a little bit more stringent on that if that's the avenue we wanna go. And again, you know, like Gio was saying, how we make a recommendation
Right.
or not, if this is something where you would want us as building services to get in this and be a little more explicit and come back before you make a recommendation, we can do that.
Well, again, the enforcement side of this is really your responsibility.
Mhm.
And a lot of the things I'm bringing up are to make it easier
Mhm.
for you to
But for us to
enforce.
get the changes on this instead of just approving it for council.
Well, and we can do this several times, or we can do it to the best of our ability once.
So the whole reason, I don't know, Mr. Fielder, if you're aware, did you look at the actual M1 that we have right now in place?
I own an M1.
But have you read the ordinance and why these edits were added in?
No, I can't say that I have.
Okay, so if you go onto the City of Alpine website and type in M1, there's really no boundaries for anything that can be done in M1. And so that's why, with the help of the city manager and other, going to other cities and finding out how they were doing their M1 is the way we actually are even more strict than a lot of the M1s that I looked at in other cities. And I understand you may have some concerns with laboratories or some of the other things, but with that being said, the reason that this is in an action is because we're trying to stop anything that would be high hazard to be put in an industrial place.
Right, but again, we're
There's-
talking about definitions.
There's no boundaries right now with the M1 that we have in place.
So again, I was explaining to Matt, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not licensed to practice law, but I have written probably 100 patents. And one thing about a patent is there can be no ambiguity. The other thing in a patent is you have to use definitions because a lot of words in the English language have multiple meanings. So you have to be careful that you don't use bear. Now, spelling could define bear, but there's other things. A butt means next to. But there's other definitions for a butt as well.
Okay, well, we're getting a little out of.
So my next
Get back to the
question,
subject.
next question is C, area restrictions. Yeah, you've struck off
Well,
the,
we were still talking laboratories here.
oh, we're still on laboratories. I thought we were gonna try to put some definitions.
Well, I mean, that's, Gio, you were still asking about laboratories, right?
I just wanted to know if there's consensus, and I just wanted to reiterate that this has been discussed. There was opportunities to make recommendations.
For the city
and we're at
council,
the
you're
point
talking
where
about, yeah.
we're supposed to make recommendations, which is fine if you don't want to.
Mhm.
But, I think we need to kind of hunt down as far as what needs to be done so we can get it back. It still has to go to city council. It's still gonna be an ordinance. It's a process, but I just think we need to be mindful that we have nothing in place right now.
Mhm.
And this would prevent, like
Yeah,
Jessica
it's all
said,
new, yes.
some of the issues that came up where we're about to have those lithium ion storage, which should technically be allowed in an M1 at the moment, so.
Yeah, I-
that needs to be considered.
I think this, I think this, E section, the limitation of uses. And I'm not sure whether you would like the wording of there or not, but I think laboratories, of course, all this is included in there. So I think laboratory is probably okay to keep that in there, and rely on E.
And how does the rest of the commissioners feel about that? Think just leave it in, take it out?
Yeah. we can
Well,
leave
it says that not in, use include but are not limited to. Right there in E.
Right,
Is
yep,
that-
yep.
So that not limited to gives you a wide range,
Right.
I guess.
So is the general consensus to leave it in?
So I vote to, I think we should leave it in.
The Commissioner Lang, thanks. And you too, right? You just said.
Yes.
Okay, so that's.
Sorry.
No problem. General consensus there. What other proposed amendments do y'all have?
Well, again, I think we need to put a little bit more flesh in limitations of uses. The previous ordinance that we looked at actually had definitions as a first entry. And my experience with similar documents is that it's always a good idea to put in definitions at the beginning of a document. Because again, as Drew points out, my definition of high risk and hazardous may not be the same as his definition of high risk and hazardous. So, I'm okay with leaving laboratories in as long as we put some restrictions.
And that's something we can explore in the next. This is
And
just to
again, we
get
can
this in
pass, we
place
can
for
approve
what we
this
have
and then
right
we
now.
can start amending it again.
Right,
Let
this
us
is
know what our
just to get
concerns are.
this
I think
in
that's what,
place.
what I'm thinking is let it, get it there now, and then you guys get together and work on what you need to.
We can always add to
Yeah.
it. This is just,
That's
because
fine.
again, like she said, there's no restrictions.
She's
on
right.
it.
It's right now, it's
Wide
blank.
open.
Right.
Yeah, it's blank. We are wide
Okay.
open. It's.
No, I
scary.
did not know that.
Yeah.
So in my
They've
opinion,
already
if we can
tried
get
to do
this in
that.
place, then we could start adding
I think this
layers.
is a
on
great
it.
start. This is a great, yeah, we
And
need
then
this.
go back and-
Correct.
Then I just have one more comment that involves the very last page, page 7. On the left-hand side, you've used front yard, street side yard, interior yard, and rear yard. This is a commercial property. I'm not sure yard is the right word to use there. What you're really referring to is a setback, is it not?
It's the same wording that we have for all of the zonings. It's just pretty much the same.
But in the residential
word.
code, a yard means something.
I understand that,
And
but in the commercial ones, they say the same, so C1, C2, C1A. And all of the other commercial zonings that we have use the word yard in it.
yeah,
However, in the future, I would love to change that. I'm just
Right,
saying,
I was gonna
I'm just
say-
following the same.
I understand consistency, but you know, just because it's not broken doesn't mean you can't improve it.
One of the biggest items, I think that the city council tasked the commission was redoing the zoning ordinances. It's just very in-depth, and I think that
Oh,
that'd be a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Change,
Make a note of that.
Then I have, the only
Yeah,
other
or
thing I
lot
have,
line.
and actually Joanne happens to be affected by. And that is this lot size minimum of 5,000 square feet. For 40 years, people have sold properties here. And the description is lot 5 1/2 of lot 6. Well, there is a lot of properties around here now that will not meet a 5,000 square foot requirement. And we can end up with a lot of empty space in the city, or we may have to reconsider what is considered minimum. And I actually brought this up because the property next to me, the property between the law office and the property I own is a half a lot. And I don't believe
So
that-
it's not square, not 5,000.
I doubt that it's 5,000 square feet. I didn't go over there and measure it. But I don't know, again, we want to regulate, we don't want to be punitive. And that's it for me. And I know y'all are tired of listening to me, and I apologize.
I think you bring up some good points and a good conversation.
We could look into that and make comparable whether we want it to be new construction only. Or if there's some grandfathering.
I was just thinking, because I was doing the math real quick, but most of the lots that I deal with. Because the square footage came off of, the already in place square footages that we have. And an average lot that you get has to have at least 50 feet in its front yard. And it's at least 100 typically, if not more. I put just 50 by 150 is 750 square feet, so it's like, or 7,500 square feet. So I don't think 5,000 square feet is that big of a lot. Pretty small. lot.
Are there smaller ones though?
In the
No,
ordinances,
you have to have at least,
all of the other districts
Yeah.
are at least 5,000, 6,000.
residential. So I feel like in a commercial, 5,000 minimum is not that big of a lot.
Are they getting that by 50 by 100?
Yeah,
Yeah.
A little more than 8 of an acre.
Okay.
but most residential lots are a little bit longer than 100. So that's why I was like,
Yeah.
I really
but-
don't see that being a problem to meet that
but
requirement.
When
in a-
you
in an
use the
industrial
word
buffer zone.
most, that doesn't mesh well with minimum. And I'm not arguing with you. The other thing, if there's a minimum size, and then if you also factor in permeable surfaces, which I believe commercial property still must comply with permeable surfaces,
That's fine.
then you don't leave a whole lot of space to
This
do
is-
anything on the
This
property.
is not commercial, this is manufacturing.
No, this is an M1. This is about M1
Industrial.
property, which is
Right.
commercial.
Manufacturing zone. So it's not commercial, it's manufacturing. What we're talking about.
Well, again, let's go back to definitions. Look at this long list of all the things that are allowed.
Right, yeah, manufacturing, right?
Industrial.
Industrial.
Industrial, not
Yeah,
manufacturing.
They just call it.
And again, your definition of manufacturing is probably different than my definition of manufacturing.
Well, are there any places that would be affected by the 5,000 square foot that you can think of?
Right
Not
here.
in an industrial zone. It's a commercial.
No, no.
It's only along.
Is she not an M1?
Not be zoned.
No, it's only along the railroad.
Only along the railroad.
Yes. That's the only place inside city limits that you'll find M1.
Okay, all right, so this is defining M1 versus, because no, I am considered commercial.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
But
no,
it's
what is the
not
zone?
M1.
It's about
M1's by railroad.
What does commercial mean? what is what's number, is it an M2? Is it?
C1.
C1, C2,
C1.
C1A.
Okay, but I thought that C1, C2 and C1A were either residential or light industrial.
No, we
No,
only
no.
had the M1 and there were no definitions on M1, and that's what we ran into with the battery plant, and that's
Right.
why they decided they were gonna do the definition of it, which had never been done. It was
Right.
like
Okay.
a
Yep.
blank page.
Okay,
So
so
this is a good start.
I'm sorry, I'm operating with
Right.
bogus
You just
bad
got here.
information.
I think it's all, that's all the railroad tracks, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
only
yeah,
along the railroad
Right,
track.
yeah, that's what I thought. So I think the 5,000 is fine.
Good start.
I don't know if any businesses so far right now or any vacant, not saying there couldn't be, that would be, you know, hindered by that. I don't-
The only place that comes to mind might be where he just mentioned earlier, where they're going across and doing the little, what is it, the skate rink or something right there? And they have that there's little patches along the way there that you said he was trying to turn it into parking or something like that over there. Is that
It's in a
not,
C2.
yeah, but that's on the other, isn't that on the next to the railroad
It
track?
backs
on
up,
this side?
but it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
apparently it's only on the south side
Yes,
of the
that's
track.
what she's talking about. Yeah, but that's commercial.
That's commercial.
It is commercial still.
That's cool.
And you could still do commercial in the M1.
I don't know, I was just thinking that's.
Again,
along that line.
definitions count a lot because you said any property along the tracks. Well, that's any property along the
Yeah,
tracks.
yeah.
So like I keep pull up the map, so y'all can see a little better. So you'll see that
Oh, using the right map.
the M1 is right here. Okay, there are
Yeah.
certain lots
See, and
that
that's what-
are very minimal. Very few lots next to the railroad because they're touching, that they were able to change it. And I believe, an example of one is at that substation, the AEP substation
Right.
on Seventh and Murphy, that's an example of an M1.
Hmm.
But mostly you'll have it directly next to the railroad, and not really many private lots
And-
are in one currently.
and were you aware of, like, what was it? It was the battery plant that they were trying to put right there
This
by
is
the
battery,
property
right
and
here,
have it
yeah.
rezoned. and
Well,
it was like-
it was right there at that
There was that.
substation.
Right.
There's two of them.
Yeah, there was one,
Yeah.
the one we had talked about earlier was just south of 15th Street. Of
You
Dollar
can see it,
General,
look out.
of the Dollar General on 15th, and there was another one here, 11th.
By the car wash, yeah.
Or
By
by
the
the,
Dollar General.
By the Dollar, yeah.
Dollar General
yeah,
Right across the street.
and then the other one was
over by Clayton Shoots,
Clayton Shoots.
the substation.
Mhm.
You know, just-
Okay, back to this. I'm fine with the 5,000 square foot minimum.
Yeah,
I don't know
how you could do
And,
Yeah.
and better understanding the point and purpose. I'm for supporting it and approving it for the city to approve.
Yeah.
Now can someone just make a motion to approve?
I make a motion that we approve.
I second it. For somebody.
All aye.
Aye.
Unanimously approved. Go.
We need to open up to new business?
So next, is board member comment.
Okay. Reports of officers? Do you have any reports? Comments?
Well, I want to welcome.
Okay.
Welcome
Thank
to-
you.
to this and congratulations, you, because I was not here in the last meeting. Thank you
Oh,
for
okay.
taking the position, and I think this is a great team working together for the good of the community.
It's a very important role.
Just happy to be here. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you.
I'm delighted to be here and I want to make sure that Drew and Jennifer understand that my job, Jessica, sorry. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, and I get Daryl and Darren mixed up all the time too. Sorry. I just want you two to know that I'm here to help. And that ask me if you want me to help and I'll make coffee if that's, as Tom said, I want to make your jobs easier. The easier it is, the more you can accomplish.
I
Thank you.
appreciate what this commission's doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Done.
You done? Okay, I think we're done with that. Do we need to open up for new business?
No, we have to keep it to what's on the agenda.
Okay,
with the
all right.
chunk.
Any announcements? Motion to adjourn?
Okay.
Adjourn,
All right.
19:10 local time.
Bars are still open.
Sorry,
It's Monday night.